Hey everyone, it's LJ here. Welcome back to another Squdge craft video. So we are doing another resin piece today. We're going to be using this beautiful heart mould to create a memorial piece for this lovely lady's dog. What we're going to do is we're going to divide this in half. And one half is going to be clear with some flowers in and one half is going to be coloured. Now, if you've ever used resin, you know that you try and mix two colours together and you get the resin does what it wants. Resin is amazing, but it does like to do what it wants. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this piece of acetate to create a divide down the middle. So I'm going to cut a piece to size. We're going to hot glue it on. And we're going to kind of hope that it looks... So this isn't the thickest acetate I've got. I don't want like a dead straight line if I can avoid it. I would quite like a little bit of natural flow. So I'm hoping the weight of the resin will sort of cause the acetate to bend slightly and we'll get a slightly more organic shape rather than a dead straight line. But if I end up with a dead straight line, it's not a problem. Just that's what I'm hoping for. So I have 3 different thicknesses of acetate. I'm using the middle one. My fear is that the lightest weight acetate will just be pushed over by the weight of the resin. So we're going to use this. Now, acetate and resin do tend to bond together. But you can peel it apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to add it on, and then we're going to add double-sided tape. And in theory, the double-sided tape will stop it from adhering completely to the acetate. However, if it does bond completely to the acetate, I'm not that worried. I'll be honest with you, I'm not that worried. Because of the plan that I have. This isn't going to be filled right up to the top with all of this, because on top of the coloured side there's going to be some things added. So we're not filling this all the way up to the top, so there is the potential for things to adjust and adapt and fill in any gaps, things like that. And if it ends up that the acetate stays in there, well then the acetate will stay in there and be hidden by the resin. So the plan is for it to be removable, but we shall see. Okay, so I've got my acetate and I'm cutting it to just shorter than the mould. It's going to come almost to the top. And then I'm going to fold one end, which is going to be the bottom piece. Now, acetate can be fiddly to fold, so I'm just using something to help me burnish it down. I'm going to hold that at the bottom and then figure out where I want the top fold to be. So basically this is going to stick to one half of the top of the heart and one half of the point at the bottom. As you can see, I'm just placing it in there and you can see where it's going to be secured to. I'm then going to use some hot glue to hold certain parts of it in place. I am also going to use tape. This is a little bit fiddly. I'm not going to lie, it didn't go quite as smoothly as I was hoping. It is a little bit fiddly. The hot glue will be good because you will be able to take it off of the silicone mould, so you won't end up with hot glue in your finished piece. Same with the tape. So I'm just attaching bits and pieces on, seeing where I wanted it to go, and I'm going to be completely honest with you all. There was a mishap. I did have an error, and I'm going to keep it in to show you that even if you do make an error, you can fix things. So I thought I'd got this in place. I was relatively happy with it. I thought things were going okay. And when I poured the first layer of resin in, as you will see, it just did not go to plan. So I had to do it a second time. And I'm keeping this in to show you that it's not a disaster when something goes wrong. So I now have a new piece of acetate. The first piece was too long, which is why it was bowing the way that it was. I'm going to apologise, my head gets in the way a little bit while I'm setting this up. So at the top and the bottom of my acetate strip, I am attaching it with hot glue and with tape. So it's got a little bit of hot glue on it, and then I'm attaching it with tape as well, at the top and the bottom. I do go back in a minute and I add some along the base as well. I'm going to use these little pots that I've got to try and keep the acetate at a slight curve. I didn't want it to be a straight line down the middle. I wanted it to have some movement in it, so it's sort of like this curved shape. I'm then going to mix up my resin once I've got my respirator and gloves on. Mix up my clear resin and add in some beautiful, beautiful red mica powder. I love this colour. It is just stunning and it works so beautifully in this piece. So once I've got that mixed up, we're going to pour it in. Okay, as I said, I'm going to go back in now and add some tape along the bottom of the acetate and onto the base of the silicone mould. You will be able to remove the tape and the hot glue, as I stated before. This will just secure it so that it doesn't drip out underneath. Also, I thought, so I'm just going to secure this so it's bent, so part of the tape is against the acetate and part of it is along the base of the mould. And I genuinely thought this would be enough to keep all of that resin over on the one side. I made this mistake so that you didn't have to. It was not enough, so if you're watching this, just pause before you copy me and learn from my mistakes. Okay, there is that beautiful red mica. As you can mix, you can see how beautiful and shimmery it is. I'll put a link in the description for this set of mica powder tubs. It's a really good quality. I've had them for a long, long time. This is the bright red, I believe, and all the colours in this set are absolutely stunning and give such a nice shimmer once they are cured. Okay, time to pour this in. I am filming a TikTok at the same time, and as you can see immediately, all of the resin has started to flood underneath where that tape was. So I'm going to remove all the pots. I'm going to pour my resin back into my mixing cup, and we're going to start again. I'm going to clear it all up. I'm going to use some wipes, clean the mould completely, remove the acetate, remove all the tape, and then do it again. But this time I have hot glue along the bottom. So that is adding an extra barrier, and I've added some rice into my tubs to give it a little bit of extra strength. As you can see, by now the resin is getting quite hot because it had been sat in the cup, but it will still work perfectly. I'm going to pop the bubbles with my heat gun and then leave it to cure. Okay, so several hours later, it is now time to remove the tape and the acetate. As you can see, the tape pulls out really easily. The acetate was a little bit trickier just because of the hot glue, but it's not a problem. You just have to fiddle with it until it comes out. It will just pull apart. It did break, but I don't need to reuse it, so that's not a problem. So I'm just going to remove all of the tape, all of the hot glue, all of the acetate, and then we'll be ready to move on to the second part of the project. Now, as you can see, my mould is on top of a little box. That is the base of a Ferrero Rocher tin, and it is fantastic for being able to move silicone moulds around without having to dislodge what's inside it. So I use those to help me move my moulds around on my desk. They are a really good size for a lot of moulds. Okay, next step, we're going to add some clear resin into the other side of the heart. We're going to add some flowers, and we are going to be using white roses. Okay, so I'm going to mix up some clear resin, and what I do is I put a very thin layer on the bottom, and I have these little acetate logos that I use. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one out, and I'm going to pop it on the bottom of the mould face down. So when you look at it from the bottom, you'll be able to read that it says Squdge Craft. You can print these yourself, or you can buy them lots of places, Etsy, on Instagram. There are some wonderful people out there who make them. So I'm going to pop that in, and we're going to add our roses. Now, flowers float in resin. I've said this before in previous videos. They do float in resin. So what you're going to want to do is do a very thin layer at the bottom, which is what I've done, and that is just going to secure the base of those roses in, which means when we do the next layer, they won't float up and disappear. They will be anchored to that bottom layer. So these roses have been dried in silica. If you would like to see how I dry my flowers, I will put a link in the description for you and up on the card to show you how I dry my flowers using silica. These roses have been fully dried, and so now I'm just going to add them in and fit them into the space and see how they look best. You can fill the whole space, you can leave some empty spaces. I'd spoken with the lady whose piece this was, and she wanted the entire space filled with flowers. So that is what we've done. Then we're going to let this resin cure, and then we're going to come back and do the next layer. Okay, we let that layer cure for 12 to 24 hours. You want it to be really, really cured so that those roses don't go anywhere. And then I'm just going to fill up the other side with the roses on with clear resin. As you can see, I've popped in the bubbles with my torch in the cup. You do not use a torch near a silicone mould. Please, you will burn the silicone mould and ruin it. So I'm just going to get out any little bits that were in there. I think there was a hair or some dust in there. Clear that out first, and then we're just going to pour that in. I start by filling the insides of my roses. Because I'm working bottom up, I don't have to worry so much about air pockets. But I fill the inside of the roses first, and you will notice that that resin does flow slightly over the red side. Okay, that is absolutely fine. That is going to secure these two sides together. I'm then going to fill in any of my gaps with some beautiful white baby's breath. This again just goes with making sure we've filled in all those gaps. I didn't want to squeeze any roses in and make them look, you know, distorted or anything, so we're just filling in the gaps with some white baby's breath. You can use whatever flowers you like that fit. I'm adding the baby's breath now so they are nearer the top. Obviously they're going to float in this layer of resin, so they're going to be nearer the top of the mould, rather than if we'd put them in at the same time as the roses, they would be down on the bottom. Okay, so I've got these beautiful images of this lady's dog, and I've printed them off at different sizes, and I have laminated them. And we've also got this beautiful little charm from his collar. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a layer of resin over the top, but so that these don't float away, I'm going to use some UV resin to secure the picture and the charm down. I was just popping a bubble. So I'm going to use a little bit of UV resin and my UV lamp to secure this in. So I'm still wearing my respirator. It is just as important for UV as well. So a little bit underneath, and then a little bit on each corner so it doesn't float up, and then a blob underneath our charm. Now the other reason that I have laminated this picture is because resin is wet. If you just put paper in there, it will absorb and will just go to mush. So you want to laminate it and leave a nice border around your laminated image. I'm then going to cure this UV resin, and then we're ready to add our next layer. So once the UV resin is completely cured, you can mix up your resin, as you can see I'm doing here, while that UV resin is curing, and then we're just going to pour a layer over the top. Now we are pretty much done, but there is one more layer to do. So you could fill this right up to the top if you like, but I want to add in one more detail. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour a layer that's going to cover the photo and that charm, and make sure the charm is completely encased in this layer. So it's probably about 1/2 inch thick, this layer, that's going to cover the entirety of the mould. The flowers are still not fully covered because the red did not go to the top of the mould and the flowers do. So you're going to add more and more layers until everything is covered, and then we're going to do a top coat. Okay, so I'm just using my silicone spatula here to dislodge any bubbles that might have popped up from underneath the photo. I'm then going to pop those using my heat gun and leave this to cure. Now, unfortunately, I lost some footage. When I took this out of the mould, I have stuck the letters BUD on top of the photo. I printed those off with my Cricut, and I've stuck them on like stickers. You can use any stickers you like. I just created the letters for his name. Now I'm pouring a top coat. Now this is a thicker resin. This is not the same slow cure resin that I use with my flowers. This is a 1-to-1 resin that cures a bit quicker. It's also a bit thicker. So I've poured it on top in the centre, and now I'm using a spatula and I am just dragging it out so that it touches every single edge. Because I did not fill my silicone mould to the very top, there is a very slight rim, and that makes it perfect for adding a top coat. Now, the astute among you will see that there is a stick sticking out on the left hand side and at the bottom. What I did was I took a spirit level and I completely levelled my resin piece. I wanted it to be completely level, my table was not. So I've levelled it, and now I can add my flood coat on top, which will give us a beautiful domed top. So you want to go around very carefully and just make sure it touches every single edge. Make sure there are no gaps, you've got no lumps and bumps. Once I've spread that out, I'm going to make sure everything is out of the container. I'm then going to use my blowtorch to pop the bubbles. Okay, so you can use a blowtorch because we are no longer in a silicone mould. If you use your heat gun, you may end up not popping all the bubbles and moving the resin and it flowing over the edges, which we don't want. We want this nice domed top and nothing to fall down our edges. So using a blowtorch is perfect here because it will pop those deeper bubbles and it won't move your resin around. You then want to cover your piece, make sure it's not going to get covered in dust or anything, and leave it to cure for 24 to 48 hours. Okay. So, top coat is now done. This is completely dry. We have lovely smooth edges. Apologies for the light reflection. Let me Let me look at that beautiful boy. Look. So we've got the roses and clear on one side, and then we've got the red with the photo and the name, and the beautiful little charm, which is gorgeous. So this is going to get packed off and sent out to this lovely puppy's mummy. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this process, if you've learned something, let me know in the comments what it is you've learned. I love making pieces like these. Yeah. As I say, I started memorial pieces because I lost my dad very young and I have nothing really. And my cats are getting older, and so I started to learn so that if and when it happens, I have the ability to create something beautiful for my babies. And it gives me the opportunity to create something beautiful like this for other people's babies. And that just means so much to me as a person, because giving people that memory for long term is just, it means a lot. Anywho, I'm going to stop blubbing now before I actually start blubbing. And I'm going to get this going, wrapped up and sent off. I hope you have enjoyed this. I will see you on the next one. Keep crafting. Bye.